Hello and welcome to the Redbex training videos. In this video we are going to talk about possibilities Redbex offers to export data which we have stored in observations in our features. So first of all we need the Redbex client running, and then also we need some feature which allows us to make some export. So I would like to choose one feature. I know there are some observations within, which is the river water levels, and if I execute this view we will see we have two features here, and just open the first one and then we will see what data is stored to this feature. So when we open a feature, first we get the base data tab. There we see all the base data of this feature, and if this feature would have data itself, then we would also see this data here. For example, if you think of a feature which stores data from a borehole, then the feature data could consist of the position of the borehole, of the depth of the borehole, or the orientation, for example. In our case, this feature does not have any feature data itself. We can see here the type of the feature is the distance. The distance feature only has the structure of keeping data from distances, and then let's see how this looks like. If we open the next tab, which is the observations tab, we will see the observations of this feature here. Just a minute to load the feature data here. We see there's a lot of data, and then we see the feature are structured in quite a simple way. We have actually only two columns here which is filled with data, and we have the sampling timestamp, and then we have the distance value. We could also have here a temperature stored to these observations, but we do not make use of this possibility. We only have the distance here. And then of course we have the other columns like erroneous, like zero reading, and here some result timestamp. We don't make use of any of these additional columns in this case. So now let's start to export this data. To export the data we need some tool. We can find this tool in the content and structure ribbon here. We can see we have here a tool which is called new export, and this gives me the possibility to start a new export definition. Actually, we know wherever we have some configurations to be made in Redbex, we can store them to a structure we call a template, and we can recall this template at a later time and start to do whatever we have configured there without having to do this job again. So let's press this button, new export. Then in the next step we see we have some different types of export here in Redbex. We have actually here we have 4 different export types. Let's start from the bottom. We have a possibility to export view members as a tabular text, which is quite interesting. If you would like to have a list of all the features in a certain view, then you could use this export. It's quite easy to use. We won't do this in this video. You can check it out on your own afterwards. And for example, if you would have made an export of the folder of the view river water levels here, then we would get a text file consisting of 2 lines having the values level 02 and level 01 as content. The system users list is also quite understandable. We just get a list of all the system users. Of course, this export type is bound to special grants, so not everybody has the possibility to just export a system user list. Also, the first export will not be the subject of this video. This is a very specialized export which is bound to a special feature type and also bound to a special data structure for the output file. So what we are interested in is the second export type. Actually, this is the observation as tabular text export, and we will just open a feature export template for this export type right now by pressing this entry. We now get a new window which gives us the possibility to configure this export. First of all, we are in the first tab which is called settings. We have the possibility to give a name for the file we are creating throughout this export. So if you're saving this template for later use and make it also public, so everybody who uses it will have a predefined file name setting, and all the files will follow this setting here. You don't have to fill the setting, but you can, of course. So let's have a look. To define this file name template, we can use the tool which is called the text template. So we have some variables here, for example, the current user who is using this this template. We can use the username as a variable for our file to be created, and also, for example, the feature name we are just using could be using this template here. The next is the specification of the DateTime format wherever we have this as a property in our structure. And we know, of course, we have it because our observation data consists of sampling timestamps, and here we have DateTimes values to be outputted and to be written in a file, and therefore we have to define in which format we would like to have the DateTime value in our text file. And if you look up this topic in our reference manual, then you will see there are some formatting strings available, and we predefined here in our template we have a lower the D as a format string, and the T is the short date pattern, which means the date will be outputted in a short form like here. And now there is also a second setting which has to be taken into consideration, which is the culture, because the culture defines how this short date pattern actually looks like. We have here 3 examples in our reference manual. If you use the short date in connection with an English culture, then you will see the date looks like this. Actually, it's the month followed by the date of the month and then the year. If you use the French culture, then you will see they just use the date of the month in the first place. Afterwards, we have the month as a digit and then the year. And if you look it up, how it would look like if you used the Japanese culture, then you see they start with the year in the first time. Of course, there are a lot of different formatting strings that can be used in this place. You can just look it up yourself. You will find it in the Redbex reference manual if you look for DateTime formatting like you see here. And you can see also there's a big variety of possibilities to define the format of this DateTime strings for our output. In our case, we are fine with the short DateTime format, which is predefined here, and also the culture, the English culture. We are fine with this. We just leave it as it is. The next 3 sections give us the possibility to define what should happen with the file after it was created, because we know Redbex is a client-server application, and so the file we are creating throughout this export will be stored on the server somewhere not really reachable for ourselves, and so we have to make sure how to get this file, and therefore we have 3 different options here. The first is quite an easy option, is to copy this file to our output files, which means that we can catch the file using our smart client here. There is this window output files, and then we will see there are a lot of output files there we already created, and the newest entry then will be our new file which we created by using this export here. And we have 2 more options for this handling of the file. We can also use an FTP publishing, which means that the file will be pushed to some FTP server we define here in the settings. And the third possibility would be to copy this file to a feature which is a document feature and is capable of holding files within the structure of Redbex. we will use only the first option. We will just copy the file to output files and download it to our local machine. The next section is called the type specific section, and as the name tells us, there are different sections depending on the type we're using, and we are talking here about the type of the feature, so the feature type. And so it's not surprising that the first setting we have to do is to tell the system which feature type actually we would like to use for our export. Well, the feature type is of course defining the structure of the properties in our observations, and therefore of course we have to define this structure by selecting the feature type so the system can give us the options we would like to have afterwards. We already know that the feature we are using here, this feature level 0 is of type distance, so I select the distance of this entry here, and then the content rebuilds, and now we have the content for the distance feature. We can choose which format we would like to have for the output file. It would be possible to have an XLSX file, an Excel file, or we use the first one, which is a text file. We can choose the column separator. We can choose what string should be used if there is no value at a certain position in an observation. For example, I would tell the system use the string n/a whenever you find there is no value and in an observation, then this string should indicate this for us. Then we can define some strings for true and false value whenever we have some binary values to be outputted to the text file. Predefined here is the string true and false, but also of course we could use a digit 1 for true value and a digit 0 for false value, which is also very common. Wherever there are classification elements in our property structure of the observation, we could choose which value should be used to indicate the chosen classification. As we know that classifications not only have a name but also a code, we have here the possibility to use the name or the code, or both name and code. We don't have any classification elements in our property structure, so it doesn't make any difference what option we choose here. About feature data, we also were speaking before. We don't have any feature data in this feature type here. The distance feature type does not hold any feature data. The structure of this section is quite like the next section, the observation data, so I just skip this one and we will just talk about the observation data structure, because this actually applies on our feature type we are using right here. So the first possibility shows up that we can choose if we would like to have the sampling time step in our export files. Of course, we would like to have the sampling time step because this is very speaking to us, and therefore we leave this one here checked. The next one is the approval status. As we don't use approval workflow in our case here, we leave it unchecked. We don't need the approval status to be part of our output file. Erroneous status could be interesting, so let's check it. And therefore, we already have the case that we have now a binary property to be exported, and this erroneous status relies on our definitions here up there. So if it's erroneous or not, we will be seen by the digits 0 or 1, like we defined here, the binary values to be outputted. Then we have two different possibilities for the properties. You know, there are quite some features which have complicated, difficult structure of properties. For example, they have collections of properties which can occur multiple in one observation, and therefore we have two possibilities here to select which property should be part of the output procedure. The first one is the easy one, which tells us the top level properties, if they should be part to be outputted or not. Of course, we would like to have these top level properties because our feature only has top level properties, and in the next step we can choose which properties actually should be part of the output. And here we see we would like to have the distance. The temperature we have seen before we don't make use of. There is no temperature value in our case, so we don't need to export it, because this would result in a lot of NA strings here, because we defined wherever there is no value, just write NA. To test it, I will just select this one and hope that we see what we defined here in our output file. Also the zero reading we will check here, so every property we have should be part of the output file in our test procedure right here. So in the next step we can also check if we would like to have some collections. As there are no collections in our feature type, we will see that this list is just empty. It's not possible to select some features here. But anyway, if you have a feature type which also is holding some collections in the property structure, then you can check here that you would like to have a property structure also being part of the output if it is a part of the collection, and then you can just choose which property part being part of the collection should be part also of the output file. I will uncheck this because we do not have some collection here. As you know that it is possible in Redbex to comment every property, not every property, but every observation of a feature, and there could be multiple comments, of course. The designers of this export feature decided that it's only possible to export the latest comment if there are multiple comments on this observation. And if you would like to have this, you can select this option here. Then the latest comment of this observation we're just looking at will be part of the output also. We don't have any comments, so we uncheck this one here. The same goes with the attachment. You can also export the attached files if you would like to. And then you just check this, and then you have also the possibility to filter the files concerning of having a special attachment tag or a special name of the filter, of the file name of the attached file. We don't have any attached files either, so we just leave that blank. And also we don't care about spatial system. We don't have to define a spatial system because we don't have any spatial data as part of our export. In the next section we have to define which features actually should be the features we would like to export the data of. And here I will just drag and drop this feature level 02. Of course we could export multiple features here. Then we would see that in the section feature data we checked the feature name, and so we would see that in the first column the feature name would tell us which feature is the origin of the data which is represented in this line. Then we have the possibility to define an observation filter also. This is the observation filter you know already, which is very common in Redbex. We don't take too much care about this observation filter because we just want to export any observation, so I just leave it as it is. And then there is a last tab which is called General. This gives me the possibility to define a name for my template. For example, I could call it Test Export Template, and I could define it for my private use or leave it public like it is. And as templates are part of the metadata of projects, we also have to define a data domain where we would want to store this template to. So I define here project B, and now I could save this template, but we don't use this template anymore. It's only a test template, therefore I don't save it. I will just execute it by pressing this run button here and then wait for the results. While we are waiting for the results, I can already open the output files window here because I know already that the result will be saved to my output file. Let's put it here. And as soon as we are informed, here we are already, the export was executed successfully. We can have a look to the log file, which tells us that we exported 611 lines in our export file. And now let's have a look. Here, this is the export file we just exported. We can see a manager is the actual user. We are used this username, as a variable for the name, for the file name. So manager is part of the file name. This is also fine. And now let's have a look to this file itself. I double click the file and then the internal viewer will be opened. We see here in the center, I will make it a little bigger. We see the content of our file. And as we expected, in the first column we see here the name of the feature which we were using. This is the feature level 02. Then we have the observation timestamp following the DateTime file formatting we were choosing. And then we have the value, the distance, which is actually the value we would like to export. And then here we see, as the temperature is not being used in this case, the temperature fields all are filled with our NA string we defined in our template. And here we have on the last position the 0 reading values of our file. So get familiar with this tool. You will find out it's quite a great possibility Redbex offers to get the data which are stored to some observation in your feature.